Mr. Deshpande has been the MD of Tata Sponge. He was executive director in Tata Metallics, Calcutta, and before he was the chief coke ovens, sinter making, and iron making in Tata Steel, which is a very big position. He was director, or rather, he is a director at ACRE Industrial Solutions Private Limited and Simplex Coke. As I already said, he did BTech from IIT Bombay in chemical, and he also has international masters for practicing managers, University of Lancaster in 2006. He is currently based in Pune and works as an independent advisor consultant to African Commodities Group ACRE, SBI, and has worked with quite a few other organizations like Trafigura, Usha Martin, Jamshedpur, Jindal Stainless Steel, Jajpur, JSW Dolvi, Hitachi Consultants. So over to you, Mr. Deshpande.
Thank you, Harish. Again, nice being with you and your team. I enjoy such meetings. I have selected a topic for everybody's listening. Challenges in achieving net zero steel industry. Now, what is this net zero? What is special about steel industry? What are the challenges? And in world perspective, how does it look like? We'll also deal with this at a very overview level. And of course, I'm welcoming all of you to ask any specific questions as well. So I thought I'll explain to you what is this net zero, because some of you may be aware, some of you may not be aware. So all of you would have heard something like terms like global warming, things like sea level likely to rise, polar caps melting, there will be change in the pattern of weather, there could be floods and droughts, and things like this. So they are actually effects of global warming, and the remedial action or the preventive action against such effects, which is adopted by the world body, is called a net zero action, climate change initiative, net zero action. So the reason for this, the direct cause for the climate change is attributed to presence of greenhouse gases in the upper strata of the atmosphere. Now, which are the greenhouse gases? Very simply, they are carbon dioxide and methane. If you add refrigeration gases, ozone, and a few others also can come in this category, but they are in smaller quantities and smaller percentages. The predominant gas amongst these is the carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is quite very much around us also, to the extent of 4-5%. We don't mind its presence, but when it goes and sits in the upper strata of the Earth's atmosphere, it holds the ability to reflect back the reflected infrared rays of the Earth. That means the sun rays are coming onto the Earth. Part of the sun rays are absorbed by the Earth body. Part of them are reflected back from the Earth's surfaces. The reflected sun rays would have gone into the, let's say, in the general atmosphere everywhere else, into the, you can say, the Milky Way. It would have gone there. But because the carbon dioxide is present in a larger proportion as compared to the, let us say, previous century, and the property of carbon dioxide and methane to be able to reflect back the reflected infrared rays from the Earth's surface. So therefore, what happens is, if earlier there are 100 units of sun rays coming onto the Earth, 30 were being absorbed by the Earth, 70 were being reflected. So Earth was then receiving net of 30 units. As the carbon dioxide reflects back to the 70 reflected from the Earth's surface, so maybe 5 come back from the carbon dioxide into the Earth's surface. So Earth receives net 30 directly from the sun and 5 reflected from the carbon dioxide, and therefore there is a extra dose of infrared rays coming onto the Earth's surface, and they have an effect of warming because they have energy, and that is the cause, you can say in a very common language, which we can say is a global warming. Now, how do you once you understand this and once you notice this, how do you take preventive action? Preventive action is we will let the status quo remain, but we will not add further carbon dioxide layer by additional generation of carbon dioxide and let it go to the upper strata. This is the position that the world body has taken, the climate change initiative has taken. So the status quo is not going to change, but the status will not deteriorate as fast as it was deteriorating earlier. And approximate, you can say, benchmark which they have set for themselves is the temperature of the atmosphere should mean average temperature should not go up by more than 2 degrees centigrade by the turn of the century. That's a tall order because it has already gone by 5-6 degrees centigrade in the previous century. So therefore something needs to be done. Now the, you can say, mandate which is there given to all the governments and through governments to all the industry is that we should have something called a net zero deployed everywhere in all activities of the nation, all the economic activity of the nation. So it very simply means, against this background, the absolute emissions across the whole supply chain should meet the targets to meet the global temperature rise of 1.5 degrees centigrade by 2050. So that is what it means basically, net zero. And when we may be using the term net zero, but basically it means containing the emissions in a very simple language. Net zero has been examined by many people independently for its appropriateness for guidance of the world body or the economic actions of the entire world, and they believe that it's like a gold standard for climate action. So therefore, we don't have to struggle too much whether it's the right measure or not right measure. We just follow what this particular net zero philosophy and net zero approach expects us to do. So that's the way we go forward. Now I have the topic is getting a net zero steel industry. I will just talk about steel industry a little bit. Then you will connect the net zero and steel industry together, and then we'll see what actions are emerging out of it and what needs to happen. Go to the next slide, please. I just picked up the relevant performance of the steel industry. There are many performance parameters in the steel industry. 1.9 billion tons of steel is being produced every year since about 2020. So therefore, one important measure which is of relevance to this net zero concept, emission concept, the climate change action plan is what is the energy intensity of the steel industry. So energy intensity is a very crudely speaking, how many megajoules of energy is consumed to make 1 ton of crude steel. That's the standard measure. The entire steel industry measures performances with respect to crude steel, although what we buy in the market is not crude steel, but it's a good sort of a baseline for everything, for uniformity of communication across the steel industry. So 4 megajoules is the lower limit, and the upper limit or upper level of performance is 23 megajoules. So some of the steel plants in the world consume 23 megajoules of energy per ton of crude steel that they produce, while some consume only 4. I'll come to this, why such a wide difference and what needs to happen, etc. This is one measure which I think you should keep it in the back of your mind. And the second one is the emissions. The steel industry contributes about 7% of the world's total emissions, and we are particularly concerned about carbon dioxide. So that in terms of measurement of carbon dioxide, the performance measure would read 0.4 kg of carbon dioxide per kg of crude steel. That is the, you can say, specific emission on the lower level of the band, and about 2.6 kg per kg of crude steel at the upper level of the band. So this is the way in which all the steel plants put together, which constitute 1.9 billion tons of crude steel making capacity in the world, they sort of behave themselves. So if you sort of make a simple multiplication, then we'll notice that what 30 billion megajoules of energy is being consumed by the steel plants, roughly, and about 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide is being emitted by the steel plants all over the world into the Earth's climate. Now, climate is uniform for everybody. It's not enough that only India acts or only China acts or only US acts by reducing the emissions or by reducing the energy consumption. All the components in the world which contribute to CO2 emission, they have to come together and act. So that's the way we can look at the role of steel industry within the gamut of entire world's economic activity. And what it says that net zero concept will say that if we are having a 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide emission today, we better keep it at 3 billion tons level only. Maybe the nature has learned to deal with it, and the excess 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide that we add into the nature is being used by the nature in various activities, and therefore maybe we will have a steady performance and the temperature will remain at a current level. The other way of looking at it is if we can reduce the 3 billion tons further down, then of course we will sort of incrementally reduce the Earth's temperature, climate temperature as well. But that's a tall order. I'll explain to you why it's a tall order, etc. So that's the way we would like to behave ourselves as a world body going forward. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so having understood this, maybe we can take a a good view as to what are the methods which are available to the steel industry to decarbonize themselves. We don't want steel plants to consume carbon, because if they consume carbon, they will produce CO2. So the term which is used is decarbonized steel industry. So that's the way. So across the world body, there are three general measures which I will identify. Now this is, I think, a beauty of this particular process, which also I like you to appreciate. That it is not speaking about one planet, it is not speaking about one geography, it is not speaking about one nation, it is not speaking in terms of technical parameters. It just combines the whole thing beautifully together, so it becomes a guidance document for everybody else. So the first measure is carbon capture. That means it generally recognizes that you have no choice but to consume carbon. You have no alternative but to produce carbon dioxide. But if you produce carbon dioxide beyond a particular level, then you can think of capturing it back. So this is carbon capture. So you absorb the carbon dioxide which you emit through chimneys. Don't let it go into the atmosphere. So the emission remains constant, and whatever emission that would have happened otherwise, part of it which you have captured, you dispose it off different. That's the way the concept of carbon capture is there. So carbon capture, usage, and S stands for whatever, I forgot the term now. S. Okay, so this storage, yeah, usage and storage. So what do you do with this carbon? How do you use it, or how do you store it? If you don't have immediate direct usage for this carbon dioxide that you have captured, how do you store it? Now, some people have actually started dumping carbon dioxide deep into the earth's surface, like a nuclear waste is being done. That's one way of disposal. So you can call it as a deep pits as the storage bodies for the carbon dioxide, and you cover it up, and then you expect it will not come into the atmosphere so very easily. And that's how one easy direct method of disposal of this captured carbon dioxide is conceived. The usage methods are, you put this carbon dioxide which you are recovered to convert them into plastics. There are 4 or 5 categories of plastics which are also superior plastics, which can be manufactured by using this carbon dioxide. And therefore, in generating those plastics also, if you use carbon dioxide, you are in a way creating negative emissions for that particular plant, and the whole purpose of net zero tends to get strengthened. That's the concept. So this is one, let us say, method, one pathway to sort of deal with this carbon dioxide emission. I just would like to also tell you, we missed that point earlier, the world steel industry is growing at the rate of 2.5 to 3% every year. So you expect 2.5 to 3% addition to carbon dioxide with respect to previous year. That means it is going to go on increasing carbon dioxide emissions. So that increase can be dealt with at least by this carbon capture method. So that's the idea of doing this. Second one is use hydrogen in place of carbon. Now, carbon generally produces heat when it is burned. The carbon also is a good reductant to reduce iron ore into iron, or for that matter, reduce aluminum ore, bauxite ore into aluminum, or any other oxidic ore into the metal. So the carbon is used as a heating and reducing agent. Now, hydrogen also meets the property. Actually, hydrogen also is a good reducing agent. Hydrogen also can be a good heating agent. And therefore, if you can go to hydrogen and replace carbon, then you are also solving the problem. You don't emit carbon dioxide as we use the energy for steel making. But the current processes for hydrogen generation, they use carbon, they use oil, they use gas. Therefore, if they use oil and gas, then by the scope 2 principle, you are not helping. The net emission will only increase. Scope 3 may come down, but scope 2 will increase. Scope 1 will come down, but scope 2 will increase. And therefore, net increase will not happen. And therefore, the hydrogen is usable only if it is green. Now, what is a green hydrogen? Green hydrogen is the one which is produced by using renewable energy. Wind energy or solar energy or tidal energy is used to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, and that hydrogen is used to power the hydrogen applications in the steel plant or elsewhere. So that's the concept of the green hydrogen. So if you use this, then you can sort of see yourself that you are not deploying the fossil fuels or the oil or coal into heat or reduction processes. You're using only renewable energy or sunlight or tidal energy, etc. So which is clean and green both. This is a second principle, a second pathway. The third one, which is also under the active pursuit, is like electrochemistry. That means you electrolyze the iron ore. Electrolyze the iron ore and split iron ore into iron and oxygen. So there is no question of any carbon coming into the picture, and the energy which is used for electrolysis will be the green energy. That means which is going to be solar or tidal or wind energy. And if this is the way it is done, then you remove the danger that the growth of steel capacities will bring to emission of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and therefore the threat of global warming. So this is the three pathways. So I have sort of dealt with this preliminary process a little. It took a little longer time because concept-wise it is important to understand them. Then we can sort of run over the next slides very quick. Go to the next slide, please. So, now we come to the challenges. The title of the presentation was to appreciate and understand the challenges in making net zero steel industry. So, actually, the challenges are not, let us say, focused only in steel making or focused only in energy usage, etc. The challenges are actually also you can say holistic. So one major challenge is high technology costs. In addition to the technology cost of a steel making, which we are currently also have to spend money for to put up the capacity, additional steel making capacity, we will also have to put up additional technology to produce hydrogen or to get renewable energies. And elsewhere in the plant, wherever there is an energy consumption which is more than what is required to contain that energy consumption elsewhere in the existing processes, and similarly elsewhere in the existing processes reduce the carbon dioxide emission, or if necessary do the carbon capture. So all this will require technologies. These technologies are not very well established as much as the steel making technology is established or power generation technology is established. The technologies need to be established, technology need to be scaled up, technologies need to be put to use, and over a period of time it is expected that the costs of the technology will come down. But to start with, high cost technologies. The estimate is about $300 billion to $3 trillion, depending on how we go about approaching this problem or how much time the technology development takes or whatever technology consists of, etc. So this is very expensive process. To give you a little idea, a $1 billion can make a 1 million ton capacity steel. So 300 billion is like a 300 million ton capacity steel plant. That kind of investment is required only to contain the carbon dioxide emission from the existing processes of the additional steel making capacity. So you can just compare how it looks like. It's a very large money, and no easy decision is possible to invest such a large amount of money, either for the governments or for the entire world body as a whole, either, because it means diverting the investment resources, money resources, to only steel making or the renewable energy principles, and then thereby depriving the other activities which are demanding resources, so which is also will create a different kind of an imbalance. So need green energy sources. You can understand this. Green energy is currently not as much produced as we would like it to be there. So we have to add to green making capacity. Here these days, India is going whole hog and actually leading the way in the world body to produce more and more green energy. Solar parks are coming, so wind energy parks are coming. And India is doing a good job at creating green energy sources. Of course, all other countries also need to do it equally. I had been to China about a month ago. I saw the mountains in China are covered with the solar panels. So now only mountains are still seen with trees and with a good greenery. Now at some places you can see the mountains with the solar. So there's a change that is taking place. The first, this is also an important point. Somebody will have to be entering into the game first. So that whoever enters first will have to bear the high investment costs, will have to bear high operating costs as well. And therefore, he will be not competitive in the big steel market. And he needs to be protected. Otherwise, if he is not protected, you are sort of dissuading people to adopt such principles, to adopt such net zero approaches. So they need protection, and therefore they need some policy support. So these are three challenges that the world body has, which all countries have, all companies have, and all governments have. So once these challenges are met with a reasonable amount of success, we will try and get wherever we are trying to head at. Go to the next slide, please. So I'm just elaborating a challenge one, which is the technology challenge a little bit more. So this is slightly granules of steel industry, but maybe it's a good to at an overall level capture this as well. The steel is currently being made by three routes. One is a BF BOF, which is what the steel plants or Tata Steel or Jindal Steel they perform. Second one is called DRI and EAF steel. So you make sponge iron and you make electric arc furnaces and still make steel. That's the second route. The third one is you melt scrap, and from scrap using electric arc furnaces you make steel. That's the third route. So all over the world, if you look at the capacity of 1.9 billion tons steel making, then 72% of the capacity is through BF BOF route, 6% is through DRI EAF route, and 22% is the scrap EAF route. Now all these three routes have a different energy intensity and have a different CO2 emission performance. And therefore, it is important to sort of move this distribution in a desirable direction. Now, the BF BOF route consumes about 23 kg 23 megajoules of energy per kg of crude steel, and it emits 2.6 kg of carbon dioxide per ton of crude steel. So that is very high. The DRI EAF performs better. So it emits about 15 megajoules, it consumes 15 megajoules of energy and emits 1.5 kg of carbon dioxide per ton of crude. The scrap EAF is the best, which consumes only 4 megajoules and emits only 0.4 kg of CO2, which is very understandable because scrap-based steel making is only melting the scrap. You are not reducing any iron ore into the metal. DRI is reducing iron ore into the metal by a solid route. That means there is no liquid taking place in this particular process, excepting at a steel making level. When the electric arc furnace delivers, it delivers as a liquid. Of course, that also is nowadays becoming straight away into the cast billets, etc. The BF BOF necessarily makes liquid in the iron making stage and steel making stage before it becomes steel. So therefore, the energy consumptions are high. So anyone like you and me would say the question, why don't we go whole hog to 22% let's say route 22% capacity usage is a scrap EF route, and thereby avoid the carbon emissions, energy emissions altogether. But a study says you need to have scrap. So whatever steel we have produced in the yesteryears can only come as a scrap, and whether it will be sufficient to make the requirements of the current future years, that's the question, because it doesn't get cycled every year, or doesn't get cycled with a gap of 15 years uniformly, or a gap of 30 years uniformly. In the pre-1995, roughly, before China became the major steel producer in the world, a general sort of a dictum in the steel industry was whatever steel we have made 30 years ago will appear as a scrap to you in the following year. And the steel produced in 1965, total tonnage in the world will become the scrap available in 1995. Roughly, that was the dictum which was there prevalent. Nowadays, the dictum is no longer holding true because China has almost produces 50% of the world's steel, and China doesn't return that much of scrap because most of the steel has gone to infrastructure building, and infrastructure doesn't last only 30 years; it lasts more than 30 years. So therefore, this dictum doesn't hold true, and about 40% of the steel can be made to scrap EAF by 2050. But given this, the remaining 60% of the steel making has to follow the DRI EAF or a BF BOF route. The DRI EAF route is naturally being favored because of its favorable performance. And now people are deploying hydrogen into this DRI EAF route. So some movements have started. First plant is expected to start next year on the basis of pure hydrogen. So that's the way the performance will look like. And over a period of time, I think more and more hydrogen-based DRI EAF route steel making will come into prevalence. That is somewhat intermediate or next to scrap EAF route level. And as you would expect, BF BOF routes are likely to go down in percent performance, actually speaking. So 23 will appear to be 16 and 2.6 will appear to be 1.8 in BF BOF route also, because of various actions that these companies are taking, companies which are following BF BOF routes are taking. It is very difficult to scrap the entire steel making capacity following BF BOF route. So they have to invest and correct process in terms of energy intensity and the carbon dioxide emission. That's why we can read it. Carbon capture, usage and storage. This will also become a very big industry because it is riding on the back of steel and cement industries. So therefore, it will become a very big industry in the world, and the carbon dioxide so captured and will be available for usage in functional plastics. They say increasing oil production. I have not understood this fully well myself. And bioenergy. So you use this to sort of expedite the you can say the growth of the plant bodies, thereby creating more bioenergy. That's the way this carbon dioxide will actually get used there. Electrochemistry route is being developed. It is still in the university laboratories. They go to the next slide, please. Some words about green energy. So you know, green energy is wind, solar, hydroelectric, tidal, geothermal, or bioenergy. They are from natural renewable sources, but they would require large amount of investment for this energy to be available to the world body. Currently, we use coal and oil as the source of energy for sort of running the industry vehicle everywhere. Now, typically, coal will cost about $20 per ton as a mining cost, and the oil will cost about $10 per ton as the $10 per barrel as the mining cost, oil mining cost, or oil taking out cost. This is the current cost. Now, if you replace oil and coal by solar, tidal wave, or hydroelectric, the investments are very high, and therefore the cost of energy, which will bear certain component of the investments, becomes at current prices not so easily competitive with respect to the oil and coal costs. That's the reason there is a hesitation or there is a slowdown on going in a full scale towards the renewable energy. But direction is known, and therefore many investments are happening, and therefore we can see now solar parks visible. And also, I read some news somewhere that a 3 gigawatt solar park in the Kutch area is coming up and is likely to get inaugurated, likely to get operational very soon. So that's the kind of investment, 3 gigawatts, mind you. So it's a large energy source. Next slide. Now we just come to specifically to India, because that's something which is far more closer to us rather than talking in generalities. Indian steel currently is not so competitive. It's, let's say, uncompetitive by about 5 to 10% in the world market. Why? Because we have a high cost of finance. The interest rates are high in India as against the rest of the world. The logistics costs are double or triple compared to the rest of the world. The energy costs are also very high compared to the rest of the world. And all these costs, when put together, the costs of producers like Tata Steel or Steel Authority of India, they tend to be higher than equivalent plant operating elsewhere in the world. So therefore, the competitiveness issue needs to be resolved. And that's the challenge to India. So how can we do it? Either we have to reduce the costs elsewhere which are appearing, reduce interest rates, make capital easy, make logistics easier, cheaper, etc. So that's one way of doing it. Or the industry itself has to consume less and less energy and find the advantage elsewhere. That's one direction for India, and that's a challenge for India. Second is the cost of hydrogen. It's currently at about $4 per ton, US dollars per ton. It needs to drop down to $1 per ton. How will it happen? It will happen because of better and better technology to do so, one. And second, scale of operation. Current scale of operation is also not very big. So scale of operation will help in reducing the cost, certainly. But it needs to come down to combine this thing, effect has to come into $1 per ton. So that's a target for the hydrogen producing industry, basically. The cost of carbon capture is currently about $80 per ton. That needs to drop to $20. This is the world average. So this figure is not India specific. So although I put it here, but you just have to qualify it, saying that it's a world average. $80 per ton to $20 per ton. In India, there is no carbon storage happening at the moment. and therefore there is no reasonable cost available to connect to Indian operations. The fourth challenge for India is the change in energy resource. So 50% or more will become renewable after 2030. That's a commitment which India has given to the world body, and actually India is in a good state in meeting this commitment. And therefore, the energy in terms of capital investment is going to be more expensive, more demanding, but in terms of operating costs is going to be less costly, and therefore two costs will probably meet well without all of us realizing it in 2030. That's the expectation. Also, the second change will happen is India will have more natural gas than coal. That's the second direction which will happen, because I mentioned to you that the DRI EAF route is likely to become favorable. It is an intermediate route between the three routes of steel making. It's an intermediate route, and the DRI production requires natural gas. The blast furnace BOF production requires coal. So as the capacity increase, and incremental capacity shift from BOF route to DRI AF route, the shift in terms of energy supply, energy availability will also happen. We require expanded electrical grid. That's one requirement, because if you have more and more solar panels at all places coming up, then they need to be connected to the grid, and therefore grid needs to be connectable. And of course, will also require energy storage. This is an India challenge. Go to the next slide, please. So where does India stand in this particular whole process of net zero or climate change, etc.? So India has announced and given a commitment that we will be net zero by 2070 and not 2050 as the world body wanted us to be. The entire world body has taken a challenge to become net zero by 2050. India has sought a certain concession, and therefore we say that we commit to you that we will be net zero by 2070. Primarily for the reason that we are starting late. The rest of the world has already started 30, 40 years ago. There are still capacities, etc. We are starting late. I'm slightly exceeding time, but I suppose I'll cut down the time that I'm going to spend on the next slides. So this is the plan which is being made by the Energy and Resource Institute for the Government of India. So I'll read a few head points. We have a 2017 National Steel Policy. Then we have a 2019 Steel Scrap Recycling Policy. Then we have towards a low carbon steel sector TERI consultation document in 2020. And we have a milestone at 2020. Then we have a milestone in 2030, and we have a milestone in 2070. And there are various pronouncement actions which the government is leading, and industry body has accepted those actions, and therefore government and industry together is traveling in this particular path as we march forward. Let's go to the next slide. You can go through the slide later on also. They're self-evident actually, and they are picked up from TERI, so you can read more about it yourself. Achieving green steel, a roadmap to a net steel. This is the second way of describing the same thing which I've described in the previous slide. So where is the hydrogen route likely to find prevalence? Where is the carbon capture, usage and storage route is likely to come into prevalence from 2020 going forward to 2070 and hitting net zero target? So that's the way in which it is shown. A certain amount of, let us say, current energy will get replaced by natural gas, syngas, direct reduction as you come to 2030. As you come to 2040, it is going to begin blending with low carbon hydrogen. That's one. Then as you go to 2050, a certain amount of carbon capture is also going to happen. Certain amount of shift to more than 90% hydrogen usage is going to happen. And like this, you can read this particular pathway. So that's the way direction in which the country is traveling. Of relevance to you is the journey between 2020 to 2030, and maybe 2030 to 2040, where the gray bars are still standing in significant portion, but they are reduced in size. The reduction in those sizes, a part of that reduction is going to come from digitization and robotics and automation processes. Go to the next slide. This is describing the same thing, slightly a different format. Yeah. So I think that's where I propose to end this presentation. I'm open for your questions, your comments, and your sort of enlightening the other audience as well by your experience and your understanding of the subject. So thank you, Harish, and thank you, Bhushan, for facilitating this. I hope it meets your objectives, it meets your interests, and my explanation is adequate enough for you to appreciate the subject. Thank you so much.
Yeah, in your last slide, sir, what you have shown some example of usage of robotic solutions.
Ah,
Yeah.
ah,
Okay. In that
ah.
case, actually, what is happening now when we are going to the customer, I mean, steel plant persons, what they are asking, what is the year rate of, I mean, when ROI.
Yeah, correct.
So it should not be based on only safety, because we are talking about only safety of people and all.
Ah, ah.
So what are the other use cases where they should not think about this ROI?
No, so very directly, what comes to my mind is first the availability of the equipment, which is the robot is being applied, will go up because the unproductive time which human intervention were causing will get reduced by actions of robot, and therefore the incremental production without having any extra investment, that investment is really coming from robotics. Actually, what work that you are doing. So it's just a shift the investment from one direction to another direction, and therefore the gains are whatever they gain in terms of increased production, availability of the equipment, etc. This is one direct ROI. You need a background work to be done in your office as to what it can be and how much it would be, and whether there's an evidence for this kind of a realization elsewhere or not. That kind of work needs to be done to convince the customer, but it is doable, in my opinion.
Right,
Second is the energy consumption at local equipment level. One way of looking at it, and because you are selling to, let's say, relatively smaller people, so therefore the question will be smaller, and therefore the answers will be like this only. But you may have to also sell the concept en masse to senior people in the company and say that this is the potential of this activity, robotics activity. Let me assume that robotics goes into some 2,000 places in Tata Steel and causes, let's say, the energy consumption to drop by 0.1. 23 megajoules was the consumption which I showed for steel industry as an average. Tata Steel may be hovering around 21. So from 21 it will go to 20. So that 1 megajoule of energy consumption will be caused by this kind of action. Now, direct association of cause and effect may be difficult to be shown, difficult to be appreciated, but at senior level, people will understand that this is actually going to happen because of such interventions only, and therefore they will appreciate the amount of investment that is justified and whether the activity should be performed or should not be performed. That's the way I see. I appreciate your question, actually speaking. If I were in the steel plant, I would also ask the same question to you, and I will also get puzzled by the difficulty to explain the ROI.